Hello everybody, I'm Deanna Vickers, Client Engagement Manager, and today I'm going to run you guys through part of the process that you may be involved in only very little from time to time. And this is basically the pre-sales and sales part of the process. I think you guys sometimes call it pre-production. So basically it's everything leading up until the kickoff, all those interactions with the client. So I'm going to kind of run you through all the activities, all the connections, and exactly how this all works. All right, Byron. So basically, I'm going to run you through what our overall process looks like and what part of the process this is. Then I'm going to talk about pre-sales and sales, and I'll explain what those are and what the differences are. And then marketing and branding, and then I'll wrap with time for questions, but feel free and interject with questions at any time during the presentation as well. Thanks, Byron. All right, so this is a little bit hard to read, but basically we have pre-sales and sales both highlighted in green because that's what I'm talking about today, and then the other parts of our process, and these are only high level and kind of the major parts of the process: development, delivery, and then sunset or maintenance. So when we're working with a client, we explain to them this high-level view of our process, and then as our relationship with that client grows, then we go into more and more details of all the pieces and way that we interact with them directly. The arrow indicates that we would be having repeat business. Our overall objective is to have clients so happy that they want to come back and work with us again. So that also is part of what I'm going to talk about today as well. Thanks. All right, so I think even people who are in my role or even involved in these roles sometimes don't know what is considered pre-sales and what is considered sales. So basically pre-sales is, I'm going to equate this to a marriage relationship because I think everyone can relate to that. So pre-sales is essentially dating and sales is a committed relationship or a marriage. So the things that occur during pre-sales are targeting potential clients, having a client introduction or a meeting of some sort, a whiteboard session to kind of run through their overall vision. And then I put discovery and estimate in the middle of these two because sometimes when we do have a repeat customer, we're going to come back and do the discovery and estimate again, but we've already gone through all the pre-sales activities. So those two can be part of sales or pre-sales. And I'm going to go into more detail as to what each of these is. So if you have a question about what a discovery is, and I know this is new for us, but I'll get there. Sales then is basically the agreements or the contracts, and I'm going to go through in detail and explain what each one of the contracts means as well. But just to kind of give a high level on that, we have a master service agreement, a non-disclosure agreement, and a statement of work. Aside from that, the other activities that would be encompassed in sales would be considered client onboarding. So this is mostly what Nathaniel and I handle before we get to kick off with you guys. So at the very beginning of the process, something that we've taken a lot of time recently to kind of dig into is what kind of clients are best for us to work with. Out of all the different clients that exist, big and small, maybe very mature, maybe one particular industry over another. You can see I have some examples around finance, healthcare, education, some huge monolith of a company. So we've come to recently that what we really enjoy and the kind of company that seems to be a really good fit for Ackland and our skills that we offer would be a startup or an entrepreneur with a new product. So that is kind of our new target these days, and you'll see some of the projects that are coming in lately will be for that. So as we sat down and tried to kind of diagnose what is it about these companies that are going to make them attractive for Ackland to work with and vice versa, us for them. And what we've come upon is that they're probably going to be very similar to us. They're probably going to be small to medium size, and they're going to have similar values. And we've just talked about our core values recently. And so when we start meeting people and talking about their ideas and their visions for a product, wheels are already going to be turning in our head. Oh, are they going to be a good fit for us? Are we going to be able to work with these people? And it's very important to consider that relationship aspect of our work, because at the end of the day, we're gauging our success in large part on whether they're happy or not. And so if you meet somebody and you have the feeling they're going to be super difficult to please, even if you feel like you've done a bang up job, at the end of the day, that's not going to give us a successful project. So that might be one that we actually pass on, even though it might be well funded or it might be a long-term deal. The fact that it could be unsuccessful based on the fact that we could never make them happy would make it's okay would make that client not one that we'd want to work with. All right, next, Byron. So just as a brief example, I put a little comparison here between people that we might not want to work with. Lumbergh from Office Space, I don't know if you guys have seen this movie, but this character, notorious for asking people on Friday afternoon to come in and work on the weekends. That would be a big conflict with Ackland's core values of, work-life balance and people having a sustainable pace. So for us, meeting Bill Lumbergh about a project, we would probably immediately say no. On the other hand, Captain Picard, I think everybody would agree that he's a pretty exceptional leader and really cares about his crew, and that would be exactly the kind of person that Ackland would want to work with on a project. So when we're at the point where we've met the client, and the way that we actually meet clients, potential clients, could be targeting specific groups. So in Nashville and also elsewhere, Damien, our new salesperson, whom I think some of you guys might have met, but he might be a new person for the rest of you guys to meet. This is our new salesperson that's actually going out purposely to meet people and taking into account the things that we've been looking for in terms of the ideal client. And he's going to various places to meet these clients. So he goes to a lot of venture capital startup groups, entrepreneur groups. And in Nashville, we're doing the same thing to support that effort as well. We go to a lot of technology user groups around Nashville as well. And I know that you guys are doing similar stuff in Honduras, so maybe it's possible we're going to be getting clients down this direction as well. But it'll all have kind of the same method, and we'll all be employing the same thoughts as we meet people and determine whether they're going to be good for us to work with. So after we have arrived at the thought that, oh, this client could be good for us to work with, one of the first things that we do is we'll invite them in for a whiteboard session. And this gives us an opportunity to run through their vision in some level of detail to get an idea of the technologies that we'll need to embrace for the project and let them know whether that's feasible or not. And so some of the things that we've been running through pretty regularly in all of our meetings seem to focus around happy path for all the user roles. That will be for the MVP. And MVP is definitely something that we educate the clients on, and many of them aren't really aware of what MVP means. But throughout the whole whiteboard session, we're kind of constantly coming back to that question of, is this going to provide the value that you need for a minimum viable product? And so sometimes they'll even include roles that aren't really necessary for MVP. So we're helping them whittle down to MVP from the very first time that we get together to talk about their product. The other parts of the product that we would want to address would be like the login. And lately there's been a lot of like Facebook login stuff that's been coming up. Payment process is also a very integral part of what we'd want to discuss with them so that we can identify any third-party tools that are needed or any feasibilities around integrating with the actual engine or prototype part of the project. Admin and reporting is also something that we've been discussing. Oftentimes this is left off of MVP just because they want to get it very compact. And then we've been offering other ways for them to get some sense of reporting without engaging the third-party tool for the robust build your own kind of reporting that they would ultimately want most of the time. So after we've done the whiteboard session, we usually follow up with some kind of estimate. And in the past, we've gone into a lot of work to understand at a great level of detail and actually write out all the user stories at a pretty good level of detail to hand over as an estimate. Just real quick, I would like a few people, like if a new client comes and they ask for an estimate, what is your immediate thought? What's like the first word that pops into your mind when like me or Nathaniel reaches out to say, hey, I need an estimate for this? Somebody just shout out a couple of words. What do you think? Yep, perfect. Anybody else? Good or bad? Oh, okay, so just shout out a word, or if you're on the Hangout, type it in Slack. Oh, yes. He said depends. Thanks, Byron. Anybody else? Come on, good or bad? What's your first thought? When somebody asks you for an estimate, do you feel all happy about it, or do you feel... Yes. Byron says no. Anybody else? Well, you've probably been on a few calls where we've needed an estimate, and sometimes we have some information, sometimes we have very little information. Well, as Carlos said, it depends, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And the feeling that I'm getting out of that is also going back to Carlos's feeling of depends. I'm really just looking for like your gut reaction, like when somebody even mentions the word estimate, what you think of. And I think, yes, fear, great. Juan Jose? You don't know why? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I think that's a pretty normal feeling. So Juan Jose said that I can give you an estimate, but it's probably going to be kind of a lie. Yeah, I think that's very common. Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Right, right. Great. And Carlos said, how much are you willing to spend? And that actually is something that we try to gauge really early on with the clients as well. So we can kind of target a certain range for them. But let's move on to the next. But I think this is a very normal feeling to have around estimates, is that there's so much uncertainty that we're afraid we're going to get locked into something that we don't want to be locked into. So estimates are very important to a client because they need to know what to expect, right? And I think that's fair. But it's also for us very critical part of our process, because at this point we're really setting expectations with them, for good or bad. And the lack of information for us makes this a very difficult process. And in some ways, to Juan Jose's point, like, what's the point? I mean, the client's inevitably going to change their mind anyway. So there are all of these considerations around the whole idea of what an estimate is and how to use it. And we've decided recently to move away from just automatically going to that detailed estimate level. And what we're doing now instead is, I forgot who mentioned it, but more of a rough estimate. Camilo. A rough estimate is something that we're headed towards now as kind of what we offer right up front. And in fact, sometimes we can get like a spitball or a high-level rough estimate right at the whiteboard session. We'll say, well, this feels like 2.5 to 3 months, or maybe we'll even widen that range to 2 to 3 months or whatever. And sometimes the client is happy with that. They just need to have some range in their mind. And then other clients obviously need a lot more detail. So in order for us to be able to accommodate both ends of the spectrum, what we're doing now is we're doing the whiteboard session initially. We're providing a high-level rough estimate. We can move on to the next one. And then beyond that, what we're going to be able to do now is if they come back and say, well, I need more detail, I need something more specific, we can go on to the next one now. What we're going to be offering is a discovery process. So this is kind of something we've been doing all along. It's always been a part of our projects, and that is we have to drill into the details before we can start building. So whether this happens, 2 weeks before kickoff or during the project itself, and I think most of the time, to follow the whole Agile methodology, we're going to be doing somewhat up front so we can kind of flesh out details in our backlog, and then it's something we're going to be doing continually throughout the project as well. And I think what we're trying to do on the whole sales and our pre-sales and sales part of the process is to mirror our Agile methodology a little bit better. So I think what we're coming up with now by just giving, high-level estimate at the beginning is more like the epic level. And then as we get closer to starting the process of developing or solidifying that relationship with the client, then we're going to get more down to the details. So we're offering a decoupled discovery now. I don't know if you guys are all aware of this, but what this is just basically taking off that discovery portion into like a 1 or a 2 week iteration, and this will basically be me or Nathaniel and Byron, and maybe you guys will be pulled in occasionally, and we're going to put together a set of deliverables for the client, and that includes like wireframes, an architectural plan, user stories, and more detailed user stories are included here. And then the client will have an opportunity to take this discovery document, so it'll be in like a report format. They'll have time to digest it. We'll come back together and have like a discovery review session with them and kind of run through all the details and get them comfortable with the sizing on things and feasibility of things. And so they'll have an opportunity to take that away and make some decisions. They might even use this for funding their project, because all those deliverables are a great thing to show investors. It's one of the reasons that we really came up with this plan. It's giving entrepreneurs a little package that they can include in their pitch deck to go away and get funding. So they could potentially take some time between this discovery process and development, or they might be right on top of one another. They might actually be, we're going to do discovery these 2 weeks, basically one sprint, and then we're going to start right in on development. And we actually have one project that's starting next week, cared for, and that's going to be following this project, this process of doing the discovery as part of the development. Next. All right, so just to review real quick, most of what we've talked about so far is all going to fall into the pre-sales category. So we've kind of identified how we are trying to meet new clients and identify those clients that are going to be a great fit for Ackland, how we manage our meetings and our whiteboard sessions, and also our new method for providing estimates and also discovery information to the client. So the next thing that I want to delve into is more around that committed part or marriage part of our relationship with the client, the sales process. So as you can imagine, this involves contracts and legal. So I'll explain what these contracts are and what they include. The master service agreement is kind of our overarching agreement, I would say akin to like a marriage license. So this outlines the basic tenets of our relationship with one another. So it identifies kind of the nature of our services and how we're going to provide those services to the client. It also outlines who owns what, so there's some intellectual property protections listed right out in this agreement with the client. It involves confidentiality and insurance. And these contracts are totally open for you guys if you ever want to review them, or I would probably be limited in my ability to answer questions about them, but I'd be happy to try or get answers elsewhere. So this process is very transparent for anybody who wants to know about it. The non-disclosure agreement, I would say that's kind of akin to a prenup. So this really delves into all the details of ownership and confidentiality. And generally we actually try to fill out that NDA before we actually sit down at the whiteboard session to discuss their project, because it would be a risk for them if they just started sharing all sorts of detail about their vision and they didn't have this document signed. So the actual order of these is NDA, Master Services Agreement, and then the Statement of Work. And as you can see next to each one, like next to the MSA and NDA, I've got like one sheet of paper because that's one agreement that we have with them. Now the Statement of Work is a little different. The Statement of Work, it basically outlines the specific project or the chunk of work that we're doing at the moment. And we could potentially, over time, as you can see the stack of papers, have many SOWs for one client. Now, in terms of the order of events on the contracts, we do have to have all the contracts signed before we would have a kickoff meeting and start developing. In the past, I've worked at companies where we didn't do that, and that's a big risk for us because we would be providing a lot of value without any sort of agreement in place. So, in general, we should try to never let that happen. Okay. So at this point, we've already met the client. We've kind of run through their vision. We have a fairly good idea of who they are and what they're about. I think we've relayed probably a good bit of information about Ackland and how we operate as well. And the next part of this process, prior to us actually starting the project, would be client onboarding. And I think this is a little bit new. So Nathaniel and I have been working together. I've got some documentation from my previous work that I think will help us on this. Basically, a bunch of checklists and some visuals. And I have a couple of examples in the next slide, next couple of slides. But basically what we do is get together with the client before we even start the project to kind of understand them a little bit better. So getting back to our whole Agile thing, we're moving more from the epic more down to the detailed level of the information. So this involves understanding how the relationship works too, and down to, hey, what time zone are you guys on? What time of day do you prefer for us to call you and have meetings, and what is your availability like? We already have a sense of the fact that they'll be communicative, because if they're not willing to communicate with us, that wouldn't be a client we'd want to work with. But now we're at the point where we're getting kind of into the nuts and bolts of how we're going to be working together and what they can expect from us. So this is just a quick example. I know you can't really read it, but this is just kind of a high-level visual that I would share with the client to explain the parts of our process. And then I've highlighted in green all of those points in the process that would affect the client directly and that we would need their interaction. So for me, it's very important for the client to know that, hey, before the project starts, I'm probably going to need you for this much time. And then as we get into the details of the project, it might be more wavy like this, because we'll be looking for feedback during the end of each iteration. And then at the end of the project, it's probably going to come up again, because we would need a little bit more feedback, some acceptance. If they go away and do any particular user acceptance testing, we would probably need more feedback on that. I think we can go on to the next one. And I've also pulled together a quick visual on how our Agile process works. And so this is something that a lot of clients have been coming in lately. They don't really understand. So we do want them to be very comfortable with our process. And so we are making a big effort to educate them in the way that we do things. I've worked in many places in the past where our process ends up becoming a mishmash because we try to accommodate the client's processes, which don't match ours. But I think our stats here is to do things a little bit differently, and that is to start on day one educating the client in terms of what Agile is, how we operate, and get them comfortable with that. So we've already started that before the whiteboard session, and then at this point we're really getting into the details of what this all means and what it all means to them specifically and how they're going to interact with us. So the last major component of my discussion is going to be around marketing and branding. I don't have a lot of detail because I'm not a marketing or branding expert, but I will say that it is something that plays a big role in the entire sales process. So basically, this is something that kind of underlies or supports our efforts. So branding is more of like a strategy around who you are. So like our core values, I think it plays really heavily into our branding because it really spells out who Ackland Avenue is. Like Apple, for instance, you probably have certain words that pop into your mind when you either see an Apple product or hear the word Apple mentioned. So that would be their branding. You know, I think high quality, sleek design, those are probably things that would come to mind. Disney, for example, maybe colorful children, animals, those kind of things would pop into your mind. And And for Ackland, we certainly have things that are very important to us that we want our clients to learn about us, like our high priority around quality, our high priority around our team and people in general. So I think those are the kinds of things that we are trying to get across to people in terms of who Ackland Avenue is and what they can expect from us. Now marketing, on the other hand, that's a little more technical. That's a little more around the activities that relay your branding message. So that would involve like launches, campaigns, promotions, things like that. And how this is being implemented at Ackland, we have been talking about marketing since I arrived, because there are many aspects of marketing that we're already doing, and there are things that we can always refine and continue to get better at. And that is refining our website look and feel and the information that we share. Also, it's really beginning to be more robust on the way that we post blog posts and make Twitter and Facebook updates for our company. It's really about letting people get to know us so that they can learn what we're about and decide that they want to work with us. So I just have a few statements that I'm going to make, and I want you to raise your hand if you agree that this is something that Ackland does or doesn't do. No, does do. We expect our clients to communicate often and engage as part of our team. Raise your hand if you agree that's what we do. You are right. We absolutely do. And if a client came to us, I don't care how much money they have, if they said, "Oh, I'm not available," that's not going to work for our process. That would totally go against what we need from them. And in the end, we would not deliver a product that would be pleasing. So we have passed on work already for the differences in the way that we operate, and I know that we will continue to do that. The next one is, if the client's busy, we're going to agree to develop the entire project and then do one big amazing demo at the end. Would we do that? No, we would not. And that goes back to the heart of the matter of communicating with the client. We have to be able to communicate with them through this entire process in order to fulfill their vision. And honestly, it'd be silly for them to engage us and not want to talk. All right, last one. This is around contracts, so I hope you were paying attention. Only the MSA must be signed before kickoff, and the NDA and SOW can wait and be signed later. Good job. Nope, all contracts must be signed prior to kickoff. That is our agreement, our commitment between us and the client. So we're committing to them that we're going to be completing this work, and they're committing to us that we actually have verbiage built into our agreements around their availability and their willingness to participate with us and communicate and provide feedback. So that's really awesome. So finally, this is a selfie of my dog from today that my husband sent me. And I just wanted to know if you guys have any questions about pre-sales. Yes, Carlos.
Yeah, I've been curious about going to meeting with a client. How technically savvy do you have to be? I recall that when I met Nathaniel for the first time, I was surprised to know that he isn't a developer.
Right.
So how do you guys deal with technical questions? Do you have a
Yes.
background on that? Do you have Byron come in or something like
That's an excellent question. So Carlos asked if how we handled meeting with a client when we are not technical. So our salesperson, in fact, is not technical at all, and he's out there meeting with potential clients all the time, as well as Nathaniel and I as well. So honestly, up front, what we're trying to relay to them is our level of expertise, our focus on quality. There's a lot really that we can share with the client about Ackland that's not necessarily technical. When we get to the point where we're having a whiteboard session, I think we would never want to have a whiteboard session without someone technical in the room. So previously that's been Colin and or Byron, and most of the time lately we have Byron on every call. But I know ultimately we would also like to bring other people into the mix, because at some point we're going to have so many whiteboard sessions, Byron won't be able to attend all of them. So yeah, absolutely. We wouldn't run through that overall vision with the client without you or someone with your expertise in the mix. Yeah, that we wouldn't be able to provide any feasibility. And if a client came in there with some off-the-wall idea about a functionality that just you know, might need alien technology in order to make it work, we wouldn't be able to answer that question. So, yeah, that's a good question. Anyone else? Come on, there's something you want to know. Yes.
Like, how much time do you guys wait to tell the client that the demo won't be ready for Friday first?
Yes. Osman asked how long we wait to tell the client that the demo might not be ready on time. So personally, me, that's something that as soon as you tell me, I'm calling the client. I'm not emailing them, I'm calling them. So whenever something comes up with a client that I feel is urgent in nature, I automatically get on the phone and then try and work out from them what the impact is. And then I might need to come back to you to say, okay, so what is possible? Or, oh, hey, this is not acceptable. They can't allow it to be late. What else can we do? So that's the way that I operate, and you guys probably have more experience with Nathaniel and the way it's been done here in the past. But for me, that's my expectation. Yes, Camila.
Um, how do you guys manage, for example, in the contract, in the first documents to the data science, are there any specific, let's say, okay, this is a piece of features or code that you're going to be
Okay. Yeah, that's an excellent question too.
implementing, and
Yes.
how to manage the changes?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Camila's question was, do we build in features as a fixed bid? So basically, the types of contracts that we would generally work with would be a time and materials contract, which is basically they're just paying for our time, and then the other type would be a fixed bid. And a fixed bid is we're agreeing to deliver a certain amount of features. So we in fact have that very contract for our newest project that's coming up next week for Cared For. And what we are doing is, while the contract is fixed bid, we have agreed to provide a certain number of features. This is not something we will normally do. This is not a contract that we want to attract. So for the most part, we will be seeking out contracts that are going to be time and materials because that is much more in tandem with our Agile process. So this is outside of our normal process, but what we're doing to kind of reel it into our process is the agreement outlines the features that we will include. The details of those features are not yet known to us or decided. So what we'll be doing throughout the whole project is negotiating, okay, we allocated 4 days for this feature, and now that we've worked into the details, we can see that what you're asking us is going to take 5 days. So we'll either need to shave a day off somewhere else in order to keep in. And we've already talked to the client about this. They are agreeable. This isn't always the case when you do sign a fixed bid contract. And that's why, honestly, most people don't do them. This client is kind of exceptional. I think they're very willing to work with us, and they understand the complexities of development. One of them has some development experience too. So that's the reason we went ahead and did it. But that's our plan for this one. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that came up our question for me
Yep.
is we try to encourage, for example, to have like a successful demo with the client.
Yeah.
So if we are looking at that type of contract, for example, and we need, for example, extra days to have like a good delivery of the
Mm-hmm.
project, uh, do we handle that like that we absorb the extra time needed to do like a good demo, or
Mm-hmm.
we talk to the client like we cannot deliver it to you, and we just actually
Yeah.
partially deliver a project to them without a feature because we say no, this feature actually needs more time.
Yeah, Byron may have some thoughts on this too, but just to recap what Camila said, when we are working on a fixed bid project, again, this is probably not going to happen too often, but for the one that's coming up, he asked if we get up to delivery and realize that we're not going to be done in time, or we might need a couple of extra days, how are we going to approach that on a fixed bid project? Well, we're already negotiating with the client in terms of how long things are going to take. Um, it would be my thought that we should not push the demo, that we should maybe cut a feature out if we don't have enough time. We'll already be engaged in that conversation with the client about how long things are taking, and we'll be closely communicating with them that. So it would be my thought that we could just keep the demo date, maybe cut one feature out or whatever it takes in order to be able to meet that date. And Byron, I don't know if you have, okay, so Byron says thumbs up on that too. Does that help? Okay. What else? You guys never really talked to the clients, so I'm sure there's something you might be curious about. Yeah. Dorian, do you have a question for me?
Nope, I don't have questions for you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Hmm?
I'm curious about most of the project comes if they contact us or if we search the line.
Well, lately we've really been making an effort to search the client. So I would say most that have come lately are from meetings that have been kind of initiated from our side. But there are clients that do contact us. But I would say at this point the majority is us reaching out. That'll probably turn around at some point as we really, really begin to get our name out there. Yep.
Have you ever had to reject a client? And if you have, why?
Yes, we did recently, actually. I think the feeling was that the client was just going to be dissatisfied no matter what we were able to provide to them. And after several conversations, we didn't make that immediately, but after several conversations with them, we came to the understanding that the relationship was already looking like it was going to start out on the wrong foot, and so we declined.
How do you this with client in a polite way?
Well, I don't honestly know how this was communicated, but what I would think we would be saying are things like, your project just isn't a good fit for our team right now. Um, we're sorry we weren't able to provide assistance to you, but best of luck getting this project completed. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
You want to throw them to their dev shop?
Well, I don't know that that would be nice. But yeah, absolutely. What else?
How long does the process take? Right?
Okay, Richard is asking how long the process takes, and this is also a very good question. There is a ton of variety, so it all depends on the client. Sometimes they come to us when they are fully funded and ready to go, and then other times they come to us because then they want an understanding of how much money they need to gather. So I think those two ends of the spectrum are what determines how long things are going to take. And so, I mean, somebody could come to us and be ready to start next week. That's not that common. Most of the time, I would say they come to us and it's like a month window. And I'm talking after the whiteboard session or after we've provided some sort of estimate. Um, yeah.
Do you also have like clients that come, maybe they had only the idea and you guys like help them?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. There have been several entrepreneurs that have come with their app or product ideas, and Colin and Byron have both shared with them a lot of guidance through their development of their vision. So yeah, they come with hardly any preparation. Well, that depends. Some do come prepared, but
But in that case, do you guys like charge or
it's all part of the whiteboard session. So I mean that's it's all around that MVP discussion. So it might be a slightly longer conversation for clients that come in with no clear idea. Um, but obviously they have some vision, so we do have a starting point. Yes, Byron.
So that's the magic of the discovery process, right? So we have this whiteboard session, and we get to a lot of the ideas and thoughts about their product come to life when we start drawing on a whiteboard, and the client starts, like, everybody in the room, it's like this big synergistic dream, and everybody's like talking about all these cool ideas and what are we going to do and how's this going to work and what happens if you do this, and this MVP starts to really develop itself. And this is like when they have zero idea or when they really need a lot of help. But after we get that whiteboard session finished, we are immediately going toward the discovery, and we do charge for the discovery. And so the discovery is where Deanna or Nathaniel is having a lot of an interaction with the client, really helping them to develop even more than just the whiteboard session. That's where they're mining all those user stories. They're talking with people that have expertise to find out what it's gonna take to do this or that. So we don't charge for the whiteboard session. It's a service that we're providing to entrepreneurs for free. But the discovery process is where we actually do start to charge. And it's cool because if they don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to start to work on a project, they might have $2,000 to start on a discovery, and so they're more likely to sign up for a discovery, and then that might give them the energy that they need to go on to the next step.
Yeah. I think honestly, if people realize the value they were getting from us, it would change the way they view this whole process. I really believe when they come in the door, they're getting like a think tank, because not only do they have the development expertise of Byron and Colin, but they also have a lot of business experience and expertise from me and Nathaniel. I've got a background in accounting and HR, and I've ran like travel and expenses for pretty big companies, so I've got a lot of detailed knowledge around a user base, and I've implemented many a software program, so I have a pretty good understanding of what the end user needs are a lot of the time. And so I think, we, at least on the whiteboard sessions I've been involved in, I think we've provided a lot of ideas to people. And I know it's funny, we've had a few entrepreneurs that I hope to God one of their products takes off, because they've come back, like Dell, repeatedly, because I think they love this process and they get very excited by it. But we don't have funding on any one of the projects that have met with this one person like 3 times. So yeah, we're trying to work a balance so we're not constantly meeting with people and providing all this value and not having a project start, which is why we've moved into kind of this decoupled discovery experience. So we can keep it at a really high level for these opening conversations, where we're not charging any money. Yes.
What about, I think, avenues competition over there?
Yes.
For example, there's a client that says, well, I need this project, I have this idea,
Mm-hmm.
and well, we give them an estimate, like 2 months, but
Mm-hmm.
they say, well, I already asked this other potential client for me,
Right.
and they could deliver it in 1 month.
Yes. So Douglas's question is about our competition and how do we handle it when a client tells us that they have a lower estimate from another development firm. The way that we handle that is we first ask if they're ensuring that the estimate from the other development company actually matches ours. So one of the reasons that I think the discovery point or the discovery package could be a selling point to them is they have the freedom to take it away and get it sized somewhere else. I think that would be a really good way for them to make sure that they're getting the same work estimated between us and the other development company. Because if they've already talked to another development company, at least we have never seen a list of user stories or wireframes to know exactly what they're sizing. And so that's something that we communicate to the client right away. Oh, well, did they consider this? Will they be using this? So we try to push back with these questions to ensure that we're on a level playing field. I feel very confident that if we are on a level playing field with other development agencies, in the Nashville area at any rate, we are definitely very competitive with our rates and with our estimated times. So yeah, for that I feel very confident. We are cooler. We drink coffee and beer.
At what point do you talk about the tech stack?
Yes, so Osmond is asking at what point. Yes.
If you said on that contract, we're going to use this and this technology, so the client doesn't come a month later, I don't want to use Angular.
Yes. We do include that in the contract. That's a good question. Yes, the SOW. So the statement of work, and because the tech stack could change from project to project, if we're working with a big company, we might actually be working on separate platforms or whatever. So the statement of work will list out a lot of assumptions. So like, what browser and OS we're going to be targeting, what tech stack we're going to employ, and then like a brief description. We're not locking ourselves into that fixed bid. But we do outline some assumptions about the project, and that's definitely included.
Sometimes the client will even come to us and say, we want this tech stack.
Yes, yes, yes. And when clients do come to us and request a specific tech stack, we immediately ask them why. Because, sometimes they just hear about it and think they must have it, but it might not actually be the best fit for them. So both Byron and Colin are really good about that, making sure that they know what they're asking for.
Do we reject a client? Maybe they're stubborn about their stack.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a reason to reject
Well, so Osman asked if it could potentially be a reason we would decline to work with a client is if they are requesting tech stack that we don't support. Absolutely, yes. But hopefully that would come up very, very early in our discussions with them. So generally we share our tech stack capabilities right up front. And that's part of what we use to attract people is, you know, the fact that we work with .NET, we're a node shop, and we're talking about that right away. Mm-hmm.
One exception would be things like Dennis Jackson's projects or this thing that might be coming up with Eleanor.
Yeah, okay.
Where it's like if you do this, then you can get to do all this.
Okay. Well, any exceptions, obviously there are often exceptions to what we would prefer to have as our ideal process. Those are left to Colin and Byron. So, I mean, I know that they're well aware of what our capabilities are, so I would have no concerns if they decide an exception needs to be made. Yes, Carlos.
What happens when you guys get a client from a market from which you don't know anything? It's probably a bad example, but what if the U.S. military comes and they
Mm-hmm.
want to make software for, I don't know, submarines
Right.
or a UFO?
Yes, yes, we're taking that
How
one.
much do you guys need to do like additional research on that type of
Mm-hmm.
industry or market?
Okay.
How do you make up for the lack of context on the market?
Right. So Carlos is asking if we have a request come in from a client that's in a very specific industry that could have some industry specific information that we would need to know about. I don't think that would be a reason necessarily for us to decline unless it was simply outside of our scope of ability to learn or understand the context. I can't think of, I don't know, maybe if we were designing an app around brain surgery or something. But even if we did have a project or product that we were developing, I think we're never expected really to be the experts on the actual content. You know what I mean? Or, I mean, functionality, yes, but the content or the actual behind the scenes intent of the application or whatever, we would generally have a SME or a subject matter expert provided by the client. And any project that would require us to ramp up in terms of industry knowledge, I imagine that we would talk about that, we would relay that to them. Likely we'd be in the same position as any other development company. You know, most development companies don't have some industry specific knowledge. Most of us, I think, are, you know, pretty well versed in what we do and maybe one or two industries, but I think we would have the same challenge there as anybody, and we would just build time into our estimate if that was needed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. Well, this has been great. What else? Anything else? All right, well, you guys know where I am if you do have more questions. I'm happy to share. I love to talk, but I do get scared when I present, so sorry if I said too many times. Thank you.